I see you there, Greg. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Got a family thing. I can only do 2 hours today as opposed to the normal 3, let alone the 4 we did last week. But I think 2 will be better than nothing, so let's do 2. And I got some cool stuff to show you later this week on the channel. Just waiting for the brown truck to arrive. Ba-doo-ba-doo. Hello. It's safe. Man, I hate dentists, even aside from that scene in Marathon Man. I can hear you, Craig. What's my opinion on EV 12-inch Force version speakers? I have no opinion on them. I've not used them. I'm not a huge EV fan in general, but the ones I have used have been like the 12Ms and Ls. I have not tried a Force. Sorry. Hey, Thurston. For more thoughts on modding a stock American Pro 2 Telly with all our vintage T's, is it worth getting Emerson harness and just swapping the current, or keep, and just swapping the current one out, or keep and swap, add third wire to neck? I'm not sure what advantage you'd need to adding a wire, a ground wire to the neck pickup, but I've not, I don't know how the American Pro 2s are wired. The Emerson harness is fine. I don't get them myself for clients because they're just doing what I already do, and I have more choice in components doing it myself. But the Emerson harnesses are fine if Emerson still has the pots. Emerson pots, or maybe they're only doing them in the kits now. They used to sell them individually. But yeah, the Lawler vintage teas sound fantastic, and they, to my ear and to many ears, the Lawlers, the blondes, the vintage teas, the hot teas, all those things sound better than anything Fender's made since about 74-ish, and certainly more like the stuff they made pre-59. So to me, it would be worthwhile. For me, I wouldn't buy an Emerson kit, but for most people, I think that's a very good option. But I cannot tell you whether or not you would love Lawlers or not. Most people do. Hey, Dave, thanks for joining us. I need to get you back on here and not interrupt you this time. Growing pains. You get better at doing this shit after a while, or so I tell myself. And for you guys out there who don't know, my friend Jason at Head First Amps does the amp pedal on Sundays, and Dave's a frequent guest there. And if you like the more typically higher gain stuff with an eye on hard rock and metal for a large part, that's a great stream. You guys ought to check that out as well. Someone, well, I don't see any of my mods here yet, but Head First Amps, Sundays they do the amp panel. Look for that on YouTube's. If this week goes off on a tangent, go to food, since I like to cook. Well, I probably won't have time for that today because I've got to go pick up my wife and daughter who are downtown seeing Six, the musical, and then we've got to do some stuff together. But there will be pictures of food popping up on this thing. This is a collection of photos from Paris and Vienna that just kind of cycle through. Oh, it's only once a month, Dave? Okay, I thought it was more often than that. All right, well, Dave's always welcome here. You're all always welcome here as well. And maybe since you're here, they won't keep asking me, have you heard when Freeman's coming out with his Vox yet? Was the Freeman AC30 out yet? I don't know. Dave will tell me when he tells you, you know. And I'm sure he's tired of being asked that himself. People were really asking about that when you were at NAMM, and they're like, hey, call him. I'm like, dude, just survive NAMM. I'm not going to blow up his phone for at least 3 weeks because he's sick of everyone. He's especially sick of answering the same question over and over again. But there'll be lots of pictures, going on tangent, so to speak. There'll be lots of pictures of good things to eat there from Paris and Vienna, if you can see them. They're a little bit out of focus. Maybe one day I'll do this at an F11, you can see everything, but then I got to clean before I do the stream. We can't have that. Hey, do I have an opinion on chambered, solid top Les Pauls, weight relief, no F-hole as it relates to high gain feedback? Is that worry, BS, or real? I don't know. I've not used a chambered Les Paul at true high gain at large stage volumes. I have played some Les Pauls that are chambered, and I have liked some and disliked others. And the ones that I liked, I don't think it was because it was chambered. And the ones I disliked, I don't think I could say because it was chambered, because I've played a lot of Les Pauls in general, most of which suck. Some are pretty good and some are awesome. I don't think that the weight relief in a Les Paul would be sufficient to cause any acoustic resonance that would interfere with true high gain stuff. But possibly, if at really loud volumes, maybe on an F sharp at just the right angle to the cabinet, I just don't think it's probably a big deal. I mean, I'm a fool who I would do a high gain gig with a 335, and that's just asking for it. Even if Friedman and Jason only do the amp panel once a month, check out their channels for other regular featured content. I'm not very good at plugging. I'm out of practice at it, but I mean it. It's sincere plugs. Hey, Rhythm and Bytes. Any sources for line matching DI transformers for XL out? Okay, 10K, 600. Okay. Love EggCore, but the 4 to 6 week lead time can be a bit much sometimes. Jensen would be the place I would look at, but I don't have any magical source. If I were to do that, the first thing I would do would go to Mauser and DigiKey. Following that, I'd go to Jensen's website, and Triad also has some real nice transformers. Can I explain how grounding location, not quality of the connection, but in terms of resistance, there's the word I can pronounce, affects the noise floor? Wire bus wires across the pots, not the best way to ground those to the chassis. Well, Gary, you're not grounding the pots to the chassis or the bus wire. The pots are grounded to the chassis by the nature that their shells are made of metal and they're contacting the metal of the chassis. The pots of the shells of the pots are grounded, self-grounding. Hey Brad, as far as the rest of your question, I could either do the rest of this hour on that subject, or I could point you towards 8 different videos I have on grounding, which do go into quite a bit of detail. And in each one of those videos, I also point you to Merlin Blinko's site, which I'll point you to now again, because this is literally a chapter subject. And for me to summarize here either would be unfair to you, because I can't really summarize it in a short period of time, or I could take up everyone else's time just to answer this one question, which I have addressed a lot. So go here to Valve. I should be better at this. valvewizard.co.uk. I need to go up a little bit. So try this again. Go here. He's got a whole chapter on it. And if you extrapolate from that chapter, you'll see why bus wire grounds are not optimal. Now, sometimes you can get away with it. I believe Dave has gotten away with it a few times. But it is invariably, an amp is quieter after I have removed that and changed the ground scheme. And I'm not changing it to Merlin's proposed ideal. I'm just making the changes which are necessary to move the existing Marshall ground scheme closer. But it gets into eddy currents, and that the different points in the chassis do have resistance from each other, and you only need one path to a common ground from any point in the circuit. You don't need to have multiple redundant paths, because then you also get issues. Because in addition to eddy currents, you can actually pick up AM radio that way. Hey, did Amnesia, what really separates a preamp pedal, amp in a box, from just a pedal with 3-band EQ? Marketing? Well, it depends on the pedal. Some of it's marketing. Some of it is absolutely marketing. And some of it is actually emulating what happens in the preamp of different amplifier designs. So I don't want to paint with a broad brush. Some of them are quite good. Some of them are not quite as good as one would hope. And some of them are just real basic stuff with a real basic EQ that has a paint job reminiscent of something that you really want. Caveat emptor, at the end of the day, when it comes to some of Dave's really nice high-end Marshall stuff with the load lines out, or when it comes to a used blues driver that you bought at a yard sale for 20 bucks, if you like the sound, it's a good pedal for you. If you don't like this sound, it doesn't matter if it costs $900 and it's made of unobtainium. So some guys are going to want to beat up DOD, and some guys are going to want something very modern and very with all these features. And all these choices are correct if they are the right choice for you. Now, I am not saying that Dave's preamp design is equivalent to a DOD or a blues driver. They're very different things. But there are preamp pedals sold on the market which are pretty much the same as the blues driver with some added tonal features. So, trust your ears. Hey, Greg. Greg did us all a solid. I can't show you because the amp was picked up yesterday, and it is on. It's already on. It's already home in southwestern Missouri. But that '59 Tweed Bassman had a cracked baffle, and I was going to show the final thing on the channel, but Greg built me a replacement, wonderful replacement plywood panel for the rear, taking into account the differences in dimensional lumber since 1958, 59. Fit perfectly. He did a great job on every aspect, and I finished it Thursday morning, played it Thursday morning, and then Friday morning. Actually, I finished it Thursday night, and then Friday morning, the owner came to pick it up. So I did not have time to make a video and say, hey, here's all the last stuff done on that Bassman. Here's what a great job Greg did. I'll tell you now, Greg did a great job. Nor did you get to hear it, but you did hear that amp through the old super reverb in the previous video. And at the volumes that I do in the room for most testing, unless I'm really doing a punishment test, you're not really going to hear the difference between those reconed old Jensen Alnicos and the early 70s 10-inch ceramics that are in that Super. But the amp does sound really good. And it may make an appearance at some point, but hopefully not out of any other reason than nostalgia. Am I a fan of pulling the V1 tube to alter the gain of V2 on a typical two-channel Fender normal and vibrato style amp? I'm not an enemy of it. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I mean, it does. You get a little bit more gain. The low-end response and the attack changes very, very slightly. You can also get more gain by using a heavier pick. You can certainly have more tonal impact than by using a heavier pick. I think people like to sniff the corks instead of practice. I don't think you would hear a recording on an album and say, oh, I can clearly hear that he pulled V1 and that's a Mullard in V2. No, does it sound good? Does the music work? But here's the thing. You may disagree with me, and all you've got to do to find out is to pull V1 on a Fender amp with reverb and plug into the input of the vibrato channel, and then put V1 back and see if you hear a difference. Or even better yet, have someone else put the amp in standby and not tell you whether or not they've pulled V1. Just kind of mess around there, make some noise, and see if you can reliably detect when it is and is not in there. Then you'll have your own opinion, not received from some guy in a box on your phone. All right, we are actually caught up with the chat for once. Wow, we're doing better. So I'm waiting for the next questions. I don't think I missed any, did I? No. I will take this time again to ask, if you do have questions, please put the question marks, where is it, before the questions, so I can tell that you're asking me something as opposed to asking each other things. And also, for those of you new to this stream, please do only ask any one question once, because if you ask it multiple times, it may think I've lost track of where I am in the stream. You can ask as many questions as you want, but please only ask any one question the one time. Hey, John, where do babies come from? Let's see. Matt Sanders watches me to fall asleep to, so I am going to prevent where babies come from, apparently. Hey, Biff, have I had a chance to get over to the Memphis Listening Lab at the old Sears building? That's a crosstown concourse for those of you who are not familiar in the ways of old Memphis. The book collection is terrific. I have not. I did not know that they had a Memphis Listening Lab. I will check it out. I do like the French Struck coffee there, so it's always worth a venture over to there. Rhythm and Bytes. Any ideas as to why we don't see many new amps that use paraphase inverters? The long tail and cathode seem to reign supreme. Well, yeah, for most players, certainly long tail pair Schmidt inverters sound better and have so many more advantages. Paraphase is never quite. Paraphase is the most colored of the phase inverters you're likely to run into in a push-pull. Cathode, more colored than LTP, less colored than paraphase. I'm not sure why the paraphase hung on so long. The AC50 there from 65 has got a paraphase phase inverter. That amp would have a much more solid output if it had a long-tailed pair, which is odd because the AC30, which was designed first and was made at the same time, does have a long-tailed pair. There are people who will tell you how awesome paraphase sounds, and there are people who will tell you how awesome cathode sounds. I would say that they're not really awesome. They're bad in ways that some people find pleasing, but most people, for a wider range of styles of music, do not. I don't understand the prevalence, since all three of them require two triodes to accomplish. I will tell you this: if paraphase or cathode consistently sounded better than long-tailed pair, Brad would use paraphase, Dave would use paraphase, even these old ears would use paraphase. It doesn't sound as good. The long-tailed pair kind of hit the market for guitar amps, as far as I know, about 57, 58, and it just stuck around because it was the one that people liked the sound of. You have much more efficient driving of the output tubes. You can use higher wattage output tubes without compression artifacts. You know, everyone wanted their amps to be louder and cleaner. In the race from 1952 to 1958, if you look at how Fender amps evolved, and one of the things that allowed that to happen was the long-tailed pair phase inverter. And then once silicone diodes became more affordable, and you didn't have to use rectifier tubes, then you could have much higher B+, more filtering, and you could have much louder amps that leads us to the Twin and eventually the 67 and later Marshalls and stuff. It's always an evolution towards louder and cleaner, and somewhere along the way, a lot of the companies forgot about the cleaner part, but everyone likes the louder. My piece of crap EVH 5153 2x12 combo is buzzing with nothing plugged in. Is there a common problem with these? Thanks. Hey, screamingdeal.com. There are a lot of common problems with those, but I imagine that the problem with yours is likely to be a couple of things. It could be a dirty input jack or input jacks, which where the contacts that are supposed to mute when nothing's plugged in have gotten dirty. It could be a similarly dirty contact in the effects loop. If you could plug in a guitar into you would hear that buzz regardless whether something's plugged in. So if something's plugged in the front and you hear the noise, you unplug I mean, if the noise goes away and you plug it in the front, it's not in the effects loop. If you plug something into the front and the buzz stays there, then check the effects loop. It could also be a ground is loose in the amp or bad. Like a lot of screws make ground in that amp. If any one of them could be loose, the jacks could be loose. It could be relatively inexpensive to have a tech go through it, just make sure everything is clean and tight. But you could have something else wrong. You could have a problem with a resistor going south or something. But usually buzzing is related to grounds and shielding and things which are supposed to shunt. And a tech can probably solve that for you for in an hour or less, or tell you, hey, this thing needs X, Y, and Z, and which is why you shouldn't buy the EVHs. Sorry, they're not well built. I'm sorry. Dave here has played Eddie's 68, and Dave could certainly afford a 5150. What does Dave play? A 68, and now he's got a Friedman version of a 68. Any thoughts on 65 amps? Hey, Jay Emilio. Man, I only had a couple, and they were both of them were the London series. One was like the higher end London series. The other one was the more entry range budget, not budget, but entry range price tier London. And that amp had some issues that were flaws because they were incorporating ideas that Vox did and ideas that Marshall did at the same time. And it had two main flaws. First of all, it had the popping tremolo switching that inherited from the 1974X. I fixed that the same way I fixed it on the 1974X. But, they just put it in there. The main issue with that amp is on both of them was that they did a boost on the EF86 channel. And the way it accomplished the boost was when you turned on the boost, it engaged a cathode bypass cap. And all that's great. You flip the switch, there's a slight thud because they didn't put a resistor there, but you can fix that with a resistor in series or across the switch, and then you get more gain. The problem is in the low gain mode, since the EF86 had an unbypassed cathode, it had no heater hum rejection. So in low gain mode, it actually lower than that, but I don't think you'd hear that through YouTube necessarily. So I had a big hum and clean, and then you boost it, and it would get louder, and the hum would go away. And that was my hint to what the problem was in the circuit. So I changed the boost circuit so that it was always bypassed, and I just put I think I did a voltage divider across the switch. So low gain, it just turns down the gain by the same amount that the cathode bypass cap did. I have seen inside other amps that Peter and Dan did, and they seem great, and the component quality level is great, and they seem real innovative, and I've heard recordings of them sounding great. I think the London might be a very specific problem area where they were trying to make it do some matchless things, some Marshall things, some Vox things, and including some of the mistakes of the original circuits that they were incorporating. I would like to speak to Dan Buell at some point. I don't know what happened to the company because they were going up, and then they're gone, and the website was down. So I don't know. But, business is a tough thing. Business is very different than being good at amp design or amp building or even anything. You can be really good at all that stuff and be kind of shitty at business. I don't know if I have a long career experience. I've just been stubborn and banging my head against the same wall for a long time, and I eventually was smart enough to put it on camera and got you guys talking to me. Do I think more people like me are being developed and created? Well, we're back to where babies come from. There are always people, none of them are like me, they're like themselves, and most of them will hopefully be better than me. People are always going to be creative or want to do things right. We have a society that doesn't particularly reward that. And if we want to change that, we don't need to wait for people to come, the next generation to come make changes for us. We just need to demand good quality. If everyone says, hey, I expect good stuff, then people have a financial incentive to do stuff right. You know, it's just the client picked up that Headstrong Princeton. And I said, you know, I hate having to charge you for labor on that because everything I did, they could have done for the same price from the factory. You know, have a ground scheme that makes sense. Have the grounds tight. All the hardware be tight. I didn't do any magic. I did like basic science. You know, here's the thing. People are like, oh, you're so mean. We're talking about high voltage devices that can kill somebody. There's no bless their heart. There's no, oh, they tried. Mama tried. If you're not good at making steering columns, you're not allowed to make cars. You're not allowed to sell cars. If you're not good at not sinking, you're not allowed to sell boats. It's not like being bad at other things. I've never played golf a day in my life. I'm pretty sure I'd be terrible at it. And if I go out there and play the worst game of golf anyone's ever heard of, you know who it hurts? No one. If I'm bad at poetry, it doesn't really hurt anyone. They can always go like that. But if you're bad at basic electronics when high voltages are involved, you should not be allowed to be bad at that. As in, stop. And everyone accepts it and just say, oh, well, I always like the way it sounds. Sorry, I went off on a rant. Have we stopped growing and developing people with my skill set? I'm sure the people coming up today with my inclinations for electronics are not doing what I do. They went and got a degree in electronics, and they're going to go work for Cisco and Google and make a lot of money. Hey, Tango Tommy, did I ever have the opportunity to work on any stereo receiver or Marantz 22? Any comments on complexity? I've worked on some 70s Marantzes that were really cool, built much like inside. The build quality was very comparable to some Macintoshes with some similar approaches. Nothing like that will ever be made again, or if it is made again like that, no one will be able to afford it. But I don't have any knowledge of Marantzes through the decades. I've had a few from the early and mid 70s. My dad had an old Marantz, probably from like 68, 69, and a pair of Advent speakers, and that's what I grew up listening to vinyl on. And I saw a pair of those Advent speakers over at Dave Halvard's place a couple weeks ago when I was picking up those Recon speakers for that basement. And I was like, I know they would not sound nearly as good as just the Nearfields I have here. They're not going to be great speakers, but there's that nostalgia factor. I could get that and a little turntable, start getting back into vinyl, and then I'm like, fool, you already have 5 cameras. Just stick with one mad middle-age crisis at a time. I don't need to get into vinyl as well. But yeah, there's something about the sound of the old stuff, especially Rubber Soul and Stevie Wonder's Talking Book. The way that when you first put the needle on and that hiss comes through, it's like Proust with it's dipping the Madeleine in his tea. Only you don't have to read Proust. Sorry, English major joke. Hey, Gerben, is there a way to determine, or how can you know, the quality of a transformer? Well, for most people, you go on, reviews and track record. Like I've never opened up a Schumacher transformer. I just know that Schumacher transformers started to be used by Fender, about 61, 62. They used them through the 90s. And all those transformers are still going really well. Okay, Schumachers are good. And then you get into Marshalls and Drake and Dagnall in different periods. You're like, well, that era was good. So from my perspective, a lot of it is that reputation. Now, there are specs, and there are usually cosmetic indicators. Like there's a certain company that exports amps to the United States and competes with companies like Dave. at a much lower price tier. And the owner of said company does not like very much. But their transformers, their bell covers are always very sharp cornered. Cheap stamped metal, very hard edges. And you look at a Pacifica, you look at a Classic Tone, you look at a Habor, and the bell covers are all stamped. Not bent out of 4 or 5 pieces and hard edges. It's just a nice stamp. It's, you know, it's all curved, and that costs more money. So the bell cover's pretty much just cosmetic. And if you're gonna cheap out on that you can see on the outside, what's cheaped out on the inside? Now this is speculation, and I'm not naming any company in particular, but it doesn't make me when I see the cheap stamp stuff, I don't say, oh, that's a high quality transformer. I also see that in a lot of Chinese knockoffs that you get, kind of thing you would see in like some Black Stars and Supros today that aren't really Supros. You know, there are indicators, and weight's one of them. Hey, Brett, on pickup swaps and installs and needed to get various pots, solid shaft, split shaft, fine spline, blah, 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 blah. One place to get all variations. Well, Mojotone's got an awful lot of that stuff. They're going to have long bushing, short bushing, split, and solid. Fine spline versus rough spline usually becomes a metric versus US. So if you're putting in a CTS or CTS made, you're not going to have the fine splines, and so you just have to get the knobs that fit. But there are companies, tubesandmore.com will have a lot of them. I usually get guitar pots from Mojotone. There are other sources, of course, but the main thing is if you've got metric pots, you've got metric knobs. And if you're going to upgrade to CTS pots or Burns or any of the higher quality pots, you may need to upgrade to SAE push-on knobs. The nice thing about the set screw knobs is that they'll fit on a 1/4 inch or a 0.6 whatever 6 millimeter, but you got to push on. You got to have the splines match up. Almost everything you need is going to be at Mojotone if they have them in stock. Thank you, Mr. Tommy. Appreciate that. All right, well, we got the mum jokes now. I can't fire back at your mum, Brad, because your mom's lovely. It sucks when you want to do your mama jokes to your friend and you know their mama and they're quite lovely and you don't want to say bad things about them. Hey, Douglas, thank you very much. Okay, got the 68 Custom Deluxe. To extend the life of the tube, should I power the amp when it's on standby? Wait a minute, take out a standby? No. All right, first of all, your amp, despite what Fender has done to it, is at its core still a deluxe reverb, which has a tube rectifier, GZ34 specifically. No amp on the market that uses a GZ34 needs standby. In some amps, like the Vox Custom Classic, the standby switch actually is installed, is in the circuit in such a way as it damages rectifier tubes. In the deluxe reverb, it doesn't damage the rectifier tube because the reservoir cap is before the standby switch, if it's wired correctly. Some Fenders wired that wrong, but reissue Fenders. But it is purely a marketing switch. It has no electronic function in your amp. It is a glorified mute. So if you want to use it, that's fine. It's not prolonging the life of your tubes. It's not necessary for powering it up. It's not necessary for powering it down. Every deluxe reverb that comes in on this bench, I leave the standby up at all times unless I'm doing a specific test where I want to test this section and not the preamp stuff. It's a $7 switch, $8, $9 switch this week probably. That's of no use to the owner. That is occasionally useful to a tech to say, all right, let's see if the problem's in the power section or the preamp section. That's, when I can do that by lifting a wire much more easily than, I'm sorry. It's a pet peeve of mine. But thank you for enjoying welcome to the channel. I'm sorry that you're going to see some videos about the 68 Custom Deluxe on my channel, which will not make you feel giddy about your purchase, but it can be a good amp. And I have videos specifically about should I use the standby, and your amp is a specific one that you don't need to, but it will not hurt. Oh, yeah. The 5150 Iconic is amazingly even worse than the regular 5150. Hey, Jim Cavosi. Would like to hear my comments regarding wire gauge of shielded cable from the input jack, which is often small to keep the overall diameter small. Thanks. Appreciate you. Well, the trouble is, a lot of times we use shielded cable, and the interconductor of the shielded cable, in order for the jacket not to be huge, is like 28 gauge or 26 gauge, which just has no mechanical tensile strength. So you get everything connected, you think everything's great, and then the wind changes direction and it breaks right there at the solder joint because the wire is just too thin. So I like to use 22 gauge wire. And it's hard to find shielded wire that's 22 gauge. I have two suggestions for you. You can buy in bulk, which is what I do, from Apex, or sorry, it's Apex Junior, apexjunior.com. I'll put it in here. I'll give you guys a link in just a second. And he doesn't always have it, but sometimes he has the RG, and then I can't remember the number. It's thicker center conductor than the 174, but it's the same stuff, only with a thicker center conductor, and it's got Teflon. It's good stuff. Let me see if he's got it. Coaxial cable. All right. And he's got a whole list of stuff. Other types are also available. Please inquire. And I cannot remember what I ordered last time, but if you call him, Steve's a nice guy. Sorry, I'm just calling it up on the website. You can buy 100 feet of this. Call him and say, hey, what do you got that's like 22 gauge center conductor? He'll tell you what he's got. And you buy 100 foot roll of that. It lasts you a really long time. If you don't think you're ever going to need 100 feet of it, I'll send you another link to a different product that I also use when I don't have my preferred stuff. And it's there'll be other sources for this, but this is the one that I use. Again, I buy fairly large quantities of stuff, so you'll probably be able to find a different price on this. Just a second. Where's my stuff? Instrument cable. Huh, they stopped carrying the stuff that I use. No, here it is. Here it is. All right. All right. Let's see. Where does it say the... yeah, it's got 22 gauge conductor. This is good stuff. Canary GS4. Also really nice for pedal board use. And it's thin enough that you can use it inside an amp without having, you feel like you got a whole bunch of a ZD in there or something. Where were we? Let's see. Now, special note on that, people will want to sell you very expensive low capacitance cables. Low capacitance cables only really work if you have a very low impedance signal. Many of the AC circuits in our guitar amplifiers are not low impedance, and if you have a low capacitance cable of any noticeable length other than maybe an inch or two, with a high impedance signal, it'll be very prone to microphonics. So don't overpay for something that overpromises. The GS4 is fine. The bulk coax stuff is fine, and neither one of them are specifically low capacitance. They're not high capacitance. It's not like an old curly cable, but they also don't have much handling noise issue. Hey, Gerben. Finished the JMI updates and some more on the AC15C1. Cool. You liked the amp before. Like it even more now because it's more open, mainly. And tone stack needs some getting used to. Yeah, the tone stack takes some adjustment. I've shown how I do it in some videos. Basically, I start about 1 or 2 o'clock on both channels, and then I will like hit an open D chord so the guitar rings out, and maybe sweep the treble back and forth a little bit, see how it changes, then hit the chord again, sweep the bass back and forth a little bit again. And there's just kind of a place where the mids just kind of jump out at you, and it's kind of depending on your playing style. But usually somewhere between 1 and 2 o'clock on treble and bass. There are other options you can use, yeah. But once you get the feel for it, you can be more fearless. You don't have to, it's not rocket science. You want one little micron off and the sound goes away. But if you play it like it's a Fender or a Marshall, you're guaranteed to get terrible sounds. I have no experience with a YSR1 custom reverb, I think, unless I do. I've had one trainer amp with reverb on the channel. It's on there. I don't have that many trainers on the channel. In my mind, it was Trainer's Twin because it was a 2x12, about 85 watts with reverb. And it sounded really good when I was done. I really liked the sound of the amp, but I don't remember what model number that was. So it might have been a YSR1, but I don't know. In general, whenever people ask me about trainers, I can say that the Bassmasters, the YBA2s, are fantastic. I don't have that much experience with others. Some models I haven't liked. But if you ask the Canadian techs, they're going to know a lot more about trainers than the Memphis tech does. Opposed to natural selection? I'm not opposed to it. I'm here as a result of it. Hey, Black Reaper Metal, that's the nicest thing anyone called Black Reaper Metal or Black Reaper anything has ever said to me. Thank you very much. Wasn't expecting that. Maybe if I do it in the black metal voice. Thanks for all you do. I don't understand most of anything you do, but love watching your vids. How was that? How was that, guys? Did I pass the audition? I just scared the dog. I've been looking at 70s Bassman 70. What's my opinion on their sound? They're fine. They're not great. They work. If you get a really good deal on one and it does what you want it to do, that's fine. But it's never been a real. It's not one of their gems. It's not a dud, just not a gem. Hey, dude, thanks for that, man. You don't destroy your amps. Well, at least wait till after you've watched my videos before you destroy your amps. Black Reaper Metal says, oh shit, that's exactly what I sound like. Ah, cool. I bet you guys didn't know I could do that. Now, if I had some more compression, some reverb on there, maybe a little bit of a tiny bit of a slap just off to one side. Sorry. Brings out the in me. What exactly is a cathode follower, and what resistor value would I recommend for a DIY 8 ohm speaker dummy load? Second question first. I would not recommend any resistor value for a DIY 8 ohm speaker dummy load because most people are not going to be able to make one suitable. Let me show you why. Now you can, and maybe your skill set extends to this, but most people have no business doing that. I'll show you the one I built. Got to find it. Last time I used it, it was on top of the meter, and I don't remember where I put it. Just a second, not top of the meter, top of the scope. Ah, no, that's not it. Well, I've got two. I'll show you the other one, because I don't see where I put the one I built. It's around here somewhere. I'll find it when I'm not doing the stream. The one I built is prettier in some ways. This is a bit more Buck Rogers. This is one that my buddy Rob Hull built and gave to me. Rob Hull, Brad, you know Rob, and Dave, if you're still here, you know Rob. So this is one L bracket and another L bracket. And his has got banana plugs and a 1/4-inch jack. And these are all resistors. And you, by combining them in series and parallel, you can go from 2, 4, 8, and 16 and all that. So this switch is a $20 switch. This is about $100 worth of resistors. And you got to have pretty good machine skills to build something like this. Most people are not up to that task. And if you're not up to the task of doing it right and controlling the heat that this kind of thing generates, you can kill your amp. So it's much better to buy one that already does what it's supposed to do. The one I have, in some ways, is prettier than this, but it uses a bunch of these rather than any of these massive ones. But a bunch of these in parallel on a much thicker sheet of aluminum to dissipate heat does the same job as this. So you can do it, but it's probably cheaper for most people to buy one that already exists on the market, that's a commercially offered one. As to what is a cathode follower, there are two ways of driving a tone stack commonly. And there's also can be used for driving an effects loop. You have a plate follower where the next stage is following the plate of a triode. And you can have a cathode follower where the next stage is connected to the cathode of a triode rather than the plate. The plate is a high impedance point. The cathode is a low impedance point. If you drive off the plate, it is easier on the tube. There's less current. It's very easy to implement. It is loaded down a bit more by the tone stack because it is high impedance. Because it's high impedance, it is not useful as an effects loop driver. A cathode-driven tone stack is more efficient because it can drive more current. I'm simplifying a bit, but it is more involved in operating the tube, and the tube which is driving as a cathode cannot also amplify. So you have to have one triode to amplify the signal and then another triode just to do the cathode driving, versus a plate follower where you can just have one triode that does both the gain and has a tone stack. But the cathode follower not only gives you more gain and a more musically less harsh tone circuit, it can also be used to drive an effects loop. So the rest of it gets way in the weeds. And again, if you want to know about things like that more in detail, let's see if I can do it. valvewizard.co.uk. Hey, there's Nikki being Mona Lisa, and there's Rembrandt being Rembrandt. Sorry, I got distracted by looking behind me. Let's see. What's my take on those 0-watt designs used on amps like Synergy or the 1-watt on Fryet's GPDI-IR? I've not played around with any of the Synergy things. I assume that both Synergy and Fryet know what they're doing. But when it comes to really low wattage amps, I've never been a huge fan of them myself, as far as a 1-watt amp or a 2-watt amp, whatever. But as far as an attenuator, which gives you the option of having a very low volume output, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I've not tried any Synergies, and I've only I've not tried that fry yet. I've only had the big Power Station 100 in, and then old VHTs from back in the day, which are very, very different than the current stuff. Hey, Rob French. Hey, Rhythm and Blues. Yeah, Triad's a good choice most of the time. Triad and Jensen. Uh, if the rest of the circuit is designed well, you could build almost anything with a Triad or a Jensen if it's a suitable spec. Hey, Gary Dawson, do I have a preferred method of power attenuation? Lots of boutique amp guys out there using different approaches. Yeah. Number one, if I'm going to primarily be playing very small clubs and in my house, I don't want a 100-watt amp. That's the wrong amp. That's the wrong tool. So I don't need to attenuate 100 watts down to the volume level that a Princeton would give me without attenuation. So if I need to play at Princeton levels, let me start off with a Princeton or AC15 or a deluxe reverb and then watch my volume on those. If I need to do a big stage, yeah, the 100 watt has a place. Most gigs today that you play, you can do everything with a deluxe reverb. A lot of gigs, you could do everything with a Princeton. Some stuff you could do with a Champ. I'm using these as for instances, since they're amp levels that people commonly have experience with. Now, there are genres like the very nice death metal guy we got here today, where a Princeton, it's not going to do it, but neither do you need to hear your crunching riffs of tuned to C sharp doom at 120 decibels. Though a lot of the guys doing that are going over to modeling and even in-ears and stuff and wedge monitors at lower volumes. But, so number one, I don't want to have to attenuate too much to begin with. Number two, when it comes to attenuating the signal from a speaker versus attenuating the signal within the amplifier, the optimal solution is a little bit of each. So if you can use a master volume in the amp and attenuate by 8 to 12 dB before you begin to have coloration that you find objectionable, well, then I'll use the master volume to get 8 dB. And then I'll use an external attenuator as well to get another 6 dB if I need to. And either circuit is at its point where it's operating, where it creates artifacts, and that's a good combination. When it comes to attenuating the speakers themselves, I would rather use a SUR or a Fryed or a Oxbox than just what most resistive circuits out there do. There are a lot of bad things on the market traditionally, and there's some really good stuff today, but you do pay for it because you have to make sure your amp stays safe, and maybe the Boss Waz is on that list. I don't know. Dave might know. For my own amps, I have used to do a lot of what's called power scaling in the vernacular. That's trademarked to London Power, and all that stuff. So variable voltage, and the circuit works, and the circuit does what you hope it'll do. The trouble is, I've not found any MOSFETs that last more than a few years or 5 years typically. It's just a lot of heat for them to dissipate. And I've tried paralleling them. I've tried some very, very nice ones. And I think it's just asking a lot of them to do, unless you were to have a heat sink the size of an Xbox controller on your board. I just saw, looking for an object the right size, I saw an Xbox controller. Or this battery charger is probably good. You don't want to have the heat sink like this inside an amp where you're adding that. So I've gone to just a variation on the Larmar for pretty much everything. And again, I'm not trying to make 100-watt amps be equivalent to a 10-watt or 5-watt or 1-watt amp. I just want to say, all right, well, we can't, I need to bring this down a certain realistic percentage. And if it's still too loud, or I don't like the coloration the master volume gives, hey, I've always wanted a vibro champ for the smaller gigs. Whatever you need to do. I mean, Hal Hawkins, whom you've seen on the channel, just picked up his old 66 or 67, I don't remember which, I think 66, Vibrochamp when the new speaker came in, picked it up the other day. He gigs with that thing on 5 with a Strat, and next to a drummer. He's happy, he can hear it. I don't think it's quite there at 5 with a Strat. It's there at 5 with a Les Paul or a 335 though. But he's looking for different things than I am. And he doesn't have any master volume other than his right hand. Hey, Ripper Street, that's a good show. Yeah, I remember Rob French. Ripper Street's very good. Though when we went to the West End, the East End, all that is quite gone. Now it's all bankers and kebab shops. Let's see. I'm glad that you're not having any problems with the noise. The noise is usually there, not because one's a good copy, one's a bad copy, but just because of the way they're mixing the channels. But maybe there's something magical in the combination of preamp tubes you have. But I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Man, yeah, I'd love to go to Berlin too. Nikki and I plan on making that trip. They're rebuilding the Bauhaus. Oops, I need to take this off, don't I? It's been up here a long time. They're rebuilding the Bauhaus Museum in Berlin, and we're waiting till that's done before we spend the money because we don't want to go and have her not be able to go to the Bauhaus Museum. She's so funny about Bauhaus. She loves the Bauhaus movement. She loves learning about it. She loves aspects of it as it influenced other things. But, I redid her office for her a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I said, if you want, I can do this all in Bauhaus colors. She's like, oh my God, no. I'm like, why do you study this Bauhaus thing, but you don't want to have Bauhaus things in your life? I bought her a Bauhaus watch. She never wears it because she doesn't like the design. But she loves studying Bauhaus design. Inconsistent. Though I don't think I'd be much of a fan of the Currywurst. My thoughts on Bonamassa video or my thoughts on the Red Knob Twin Overdrive channel. The Red Knob Twin Overdrive channel, if you add chorus, sounds like Clapton in the, about 86. And if that's your jam, that's what that thing does. It doesn't sound like, it doesn't do Cream, it doesn't do Zeppelin, it doesn't do Van Halen. But if you want to play Pretending all night long, just get a little chorus on there and work on your vibrato, you'll be set. It's not a bad sound. I find it just a very, that's that one sound. Hey, Douglas, I'm glad to hear that. That means that Victory knows what they're talking about. If they agree with me, they're right. Yeah, Samick used to make Valley Arts back before. Well, it was the original Valley Arts were not made by Samick, but then they licensed the Valley Arts Lukather model to have made at Samick. Samick is one of there's 6 companies in Japan and South Korea that make all these guitars for different brands, and Samick's one of them. There are a lot of Courts or a lot of Samiks. I can usually tell a Samick or a Court made guitar because the neck profile's always slightly off, the binding's always slightly thin, and the dots, the fret dots are always a little too small. I don't know why. When might I post part 3 on the AC50? I have one as well. I was curious about the heater noise hum I mentioned in part 2. I think mine have maybe a similar issue. Thank you, man. Well, I am waiting for 2 things to happen on the AC50. Like I said, I'm waiting for the brown truck to arrive. Actually, no, I'm just waiting on the one thing for the AC50. I'm waiting for the brown truck to arrive, which has some pots and things I need to finish it up. On the, I was thinking of the Ampeg reverber rocket, which I've got going on at the same time, because it's the same parts order. Mauser told me that they shipped a 10 watt, 150 ohm resistor that I ordered, but it was not in the bag. I contacted them when the parts arrived yesterday. I contacted them. So tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday, I should have the missing resistor and then some parts in the same brown truck to finish this up. So maybe Tuesday, Wednesday on part 3 on the AC50. Hopefully before then, but I can't overpromise. And I have thoughts on that, and we'll get to that in that video. Yeah, I mean, the sound is one thing. The Red Knob Twin is horrible in every other aspect. But the sound is fine when the amp works, which is not guaranteed due to the way it's designed. Hey, Hamilton Rosewood, thank you very much. Is there an actual effective way to get a deluxe reverb to sound like a low-powered super, or is it really the bigger iron speaker configuration makes a difference? Better off getting a Vibrolux, perhaps. There are two things you can do. First of all, you're never going to get the sound of a 4x10 with Alnicos, or even a 4x10 with ceramics out of a 1x12. You're not going to get the sound of a 2x10, of a 4x10 with a 2x10. So Vibrolux is also not quite a super reverb. Super reverb is electronically, aside from the output tubes and transformers by definition, other than that, it's very similar to deluxe reverb and Vibrolux. The speakers are a big part of that. It's not just the number of speakers, not just the type of speakers, but the geometry of the speakers in the cabinet and the volume and the way the air moves. But there is a thing which people overlook. The super reverb is one of the, I think it's the only blackface Fender, or classic air Fender, whatever you want to call it, AB763 variants, where the mids cap and the tone stack on both channels is a 22 instead of a 47, or a 0.047, or a 0.022. So all the other Fenders in that era which have reverb, or don't have reverb, from 63 to 80, they have a tone stack, have a 100 nanofarad bass cap, and they have a 47 nanofarad, 0.047 microfarad mids cap. Super reverb doesn't. It has a 22. And that gives you more low mids. If you want to experiment, you can very easily take out the 0.047 mids cap and change it to a 0.022. You could even make it switchable if it's not a vintage one that you don't care about adding a little switch to, because you just parallel it with itself. Be careful, there's some voltage involved at that point, but it's doable. Or you could do it as a series switch, probably be easier. Just keep the series switch with some 10 megs. But yeah, you could do that. That's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. And there's the Vibrolux and the other thing, the Vibrolux and the Deluxe Reverb are both handicapped a little bit so as not to compete with the louder amps, and that they both have 10K droppers. So the two dropping resistors in a Vibrolux, the two dropping resistors in a Deluxe Reverb are both 10K, which lowers the preamp headroom because it lowers the preamp, the voltage available to the preamp. Super Reverb has a 1K and a 4.7K. So you can also decrease the value of the droppers in a non-vintage Deluxe Reverb or non-vintage Vibrolux, or in a vintage one if you're okay with changing something. You can try 10K, 10K. You can try 2.2K, 10K, which is the 70s variant, which gave a little more headroom, I think, to offset the fact that they're dropping B plus overall because they went to the 5U4GB. But you can also go as far as the 1K and 4.7K like found in a Super Reverb. And if you had a Deluxe Reverb with a 1K and a 4.7K instead of two 10Ks, rebias the amp because the whole B plus will shift around a little bit when you do that. And then you change the change the 47 mids cap to a 22. Aside from the speakers being different, it would sound an awful lot like a smaller Super Reverb being played into a 12-inch speaker. Other thing to remember, though, the normal channel on the Super Reverb does not have a mid spot. The reverb channel on a Super Reverb does. Here's the other thing. I should have mentioned this earlier because it's easier to do. The mid spot on a Super Reverb channel is a 10K audio taper, which means it's nominally 10% of its total value when the knob is halfway up. So if it's a 10K pot and you turn it halfway up and it's at 10%, it's about 1K. So most people play a Super Reverb, the mids, like between 4 and 6. You're looking like 800 ohms to about 1.2K in that range, 1.5K maybe. The comparable fixed resistor in the Deluxe Reverb tone stack is 6.8K, which often drifts up to 7, 8K, sometimes even higher. You can decrease the value of that resistor and make it sound like a Super Reverb with the mids pot at noon. So put in a 1K resistor or put 1.5K in parallel with a 6.8 and get down to like 1K. And all of a sudden you have that mid-range scoop that's happening more like a Super Reverb, and that mid-range scoop gets moved up, giving more lower mids because you've changed the 47 to a 22. Now you're more in Super Reverb territory. You're also giving yourself some headroom. That's a long answer because it was a super chat, and it was an interesting super chat. And we're going to get some more of these fun stuff, but we're going to take our only 7-minute intermission since we're only doing 2 hours today. So for those of you new to the channel, I usually do 3 hours on Saturdays. Today we're only doing 2. At the top of each hour, I do a 7-minute intermission. Lets people do everything they need to do, get a sandwich, use the bathroom, whatever, come back. And we will be back in that said 7 minutes. Coming back a little bit early since we're only doing the 1 hour, extra hour today. One more hour rather, not extra. And I always try to come back from breaks speaking a little bit softly, no more guar, so that I don't scare anyone who's not expecting it. As to the guar thing, one of Nikki's old friends from college was, her name's Kim. Yeah, she was one of the former singers for guar. And every time guar would come in town, they'd meet and go to coffee because Kim wouldn't be wearing all the stuff to, until it was time to go on stage. So she had total anonymity. And she's very unlike her stage character. She's no longer with the band. I'm not sure. I think she just moved on to a different chapter of her life. A very good singer, though she never really used that in guar. Let's see. Have I had a chance to open up the Guitar Center Tweed 65 Princeton reissue? Exact same amp as all the other 65 Princeton reissues. Just has a Tweed cab. Has the same issues or the same relative lack of issues that all the 65 Princetons do. There's nothing wrong with it, other than a Princeton with reverb should not be in a Tweed cab. I think aesthetically they're an abomination. But if you like it, get it. But there's neither better nor worse than the standard one. I wouldn't pay extra for it. Hey, Mr. Al9, could I explain the overall differences or similarities in the Fender Bassman, Showman, Bandmaster, and Super Reverb, and how do I feel about the 2000s reissues? The Bandmaster and Showman are pretty much the same amp. Neither one has reverb. I think the Showman also takes away the tremolo, but other than that, they're very similar, and the Showman's louder. Super Reverb and Bassman are more equivalent in volume, though the Bassman has a lot more gain, so therefore it can sound louder. The Showman, Bassman, and Super Reverb have the same tone stack and general topology, plus minus reverb and tremolo. The Showman's basically two Fender normal channels. The Bandmaster is similar. The Bassman, the 60s Bassman is very different. It has the same tone stack. On the normal channel, different tone stack or different values of the tone stack to do different things. On the bass channel, the overall gain structure and the way the channels are mixed is very, very different. You can get very good, clean, classic Fender sounds out of the Bassman, and you can get very good overdriven sounds out of the other three, just not as much as the Bassman is inclined to do. How do I feel about the 2000s reissues? The 65 reissue series is fantastic. Princeton, Super, Twin. Occasionally you'll find a Varbalux and the Deluxe Reverb. Those are all great reissues. They all have the same problems. They're not perfect, but they're easy to rectify. No pun intended. They're easy to address. I've got videos on things even owners can do to make their Fender reissues more reliable, and they don't need a ton. You're talking about $150 worth of work, $30 worth of parts, and it's a much better amp. The 59 LTD Bassman is also a good reissue, though. I mean, it's not a good reissue. It's a good amp, and it can be made to be a good reissue of the old Bassman circuit, but in stock form, it's not quite there. They over-filtered it for some reason, and it's got a little bit too much spaghetti, but that's easy to clean up. Ah, Diego, now I get you. Well, I don't need to help people cheat at the Darwin Awards. People don't need any help from me. I don't think the cleans of the Red Knob Twin are chef's kiss. They're okay. They're not as good as a well-maintained 60s or 70s Twin. Robin Ford might have had them as a backup just because at the time he was touring, either he has them on his rider, so they were very common for backline, or that he was given a couple of them when he was he had the Robin Ford model from Fender. The thing he had that was kind of one of these, but not really. and he probably was given a couple of those red amps, and he kept them as backups in case his Dumble went down. Not to talk out of school, I've heard that on his Dumble, the drive channel hasn't worked in years. It's all been the clean channel with a what do you call it? Zen drive pedal. Why do Fender reissue amps have so many QC issues? I've tried them so many times. They always show up with problems. Never again. Well, they all have very easily fixed problems that if they're fixed properly, they don't come back again. I have done many reissue Fenders that came in sounding meh, and when they go home, they sound exactly like the 66 or 65 or 68 examples I also have here. It's a very simple circuit. It needs a few finishing touches. In a nutshell, all the hardware needs to be tightened. Fender doesn't tighten the hardware. The filter caps that they use, the Axial IC brand caps, they're crappy caps. They're all problematic. All the high voltage ones, all the 350 volt and higher caps. IC as a company makes some really nice capacitors. They're just not the ones that Fender specs out. Fender specs out the cheapest of the cheap. Upgrade the caps, tighten all the hardware, and here's the third thing, and I've shown this in all the videos. The construction of a Fender 65 series reissue is actually slightly better as far as the board goes than the PC construction of say a 72 Marshall, which is infinitely more desirable to the average player. The difference being that the stuff that gets hot, Marshall didn't put on the board. They put on the octal sockets. Fender put some of the stuff that gets hot on the board, and then you have problems when you heat up a board that's single-sided with a thin trace. So you move all the stuff that gets hot over to the octal sockets. It's great. So Fender just saves a couple of the wrong bucks, but on the 65 reissue series, the problems are not crippling the way they are in the Blues and Hot Rod series. Hey, 70s Princetons are great. I sure have a lot of 70s Princetons that come in that do have problems, but they don't when they go home. And, yeah, I do like the serviceability of the 60s and 70s Princetons more than the 65, because if you reissue, because if you do need to make changes, 10 years from now, this resistor begins to be noisy. It is faster and easier to work on the ones with eyelets, but it is not impossible to do, or even that difficult to do on the reissues if you're qualified to work on PCBs. Let's see. Well, there's more to it than that, goody, but you don't just get a resistor. You don't say, all right, it's a 20-watt amp, we get a 25-watt resistor, because that 25-watt resistor is not a 25-watt resistor in air. It has to be, that's its rating if it's on a suitable heat sink. And there's a little bit more to it as well. I would not trust Carl's speaker soak. Sorry. Rheostats die, and if the rheostat dies in that situation, Scott, your $40 savings there could end up costing you hundreds of dollars in output transformer replacements and output tube replacements, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, the stuff you use for like a Crown Macrotech power amp is very different than the stuff that we need to use to test a Marshall or even a 100-watt Marshall, or let alone a deluxe reverb. Hey, Mark. Hey, Dave, what do you mean it works like an amp's phase inverter? I mean, is this a reply to the Carl speaker soak? That doesn't make sense. I must be missing something. Unless he's got a circuit in there to distort before attenuating the output. Is it safe to test troubleshooting amp with a speaker plugged in as opposed to using a dummy load? Yeah, I use a dummy load when I'm doing oh, Synergy. Okay, I've not tried the Synergy. Like I said, I don't have any experience with the Synergy stuff. I'm sure the Synergy stuff is good. I can say that without having tried it because I know the guys who are involved with Synergy. They're not going to put something bad out on the market. Same for the Fryette. Though I know that Steve doesn't always agree with me. I have never had anything but nice things to say about him in public or in private. But no, as far as the question on the screen right now, I only use a dummy load if I'm doing the scope. And I'll tell you why. I don't want to hear a 1 kilohertz signal at 90 dB. I don't even want to hear 400 hertz at 80 dB. So if I'm doing scope stuff, I'm using a dummy load. If I'm doing regular, most of my tests, I'm using my guitar as a signal generator, and I'm listening the way you would play it and see how it responds. And I have to have a speaker for that because the scope's not going to tell me, oh, it's not quite articulate enough. The scope's part of the puzzle. You have to have all the parts of the puzzle. Yeah, so most of the stuff you see on the channel doing, I'm testing and troubleshooting with the speaker plugged in. If the amp is powered on, I have a couple of videos up where I am showing when to use dummy load with the scope. In fact, one of them is with Dave's one of Dave's runts. I don't remember if it was the 20 or the 50, but it was one client said the effects loop was acting up, and Dave sent me that the relevant part of the schematic, and we sorted that out. And he had a calibration. Dave had a calibration, method to assure the amp was putting out like 52 watts. And I followed his calibration method, and I showed that on the video. Certainly with the dummy load, because I don't want to hear 1K that loud. I get Chewbacca in Cloud City, man. Guar and Chewbacca in one day. Of course, I had my ears covered. I'm not sure how that sounded. I don't really practice my bare walrus that often. Hey, Douglas. My first Fender amp, I picked up a Bassbreaker 15 FSR limited edition. Have I worked on this amp much? This amp is similar to my AC15 with a different personality. I have not ever worked on that or any of the other bass breakers. What I hear from owners is that they love the sound of Bassbreaker amps. What I've heard from techs is that they are not built very well, and specifically the models which have the auto bias circuit. That circuit tends to catch on fire, and it was a very expensive, over-engineered solution to a problem that never really existed, which caused actual problems. And so they ripped that out and they put in a standard bias circuit. But I've not worked on one. I have usually advised people to avoid them unless they have disposable income. If you buy a $400 amp and you last 3 years and then it dies and you're like, okay, well, I enjoyed using it, that's fine. But if you're like saving up to buy an amplifier, if there's any kind of financial sacrifice that needs to be made to attain this thing, I don't think it's worth that sacrifice and that application of whatever capital you have, because the AC15 you mentioned, you can buy those used for like $500, maybe a little bit more these days, but it's a much better amp. That said, people I know whom I trust really do like the sound of the bass breakers. So as long as it's working, it's a good choice. I'm just concerned that it won't always work, and some of the models which have the way too fancy for their own good auto bias circuit are guaranteed not to work. What do I think about Cherry Tone 2203, best Marshall I ever owned? Hey, Corey, man. I've had Cherry Tones that were really, really good. I've had Cherry Tones that were really, really bad. I've had Cherry Tones that were mostly really good, with a couple of odd bad things. And I had a client who wanted a 2204, I think it was, the 50 watt version. And it was between the Marshall and the Cherry Tone. I said, well, get the Cherry Tone and let me take a look at it and see, because Marshall has their own trade-offs. Marshall has certain things they do well and certain things they do poorly. Same for Cherry Tone. And I've got that Cherry Tone up on the channel. They had a really thick, like 12 or 14 gauge bus wire in there that all the grounds were made to, and none of the grounds to it were good because they weren't able to get the bus wire hot enough to accept solder. So it was an amp full of bad solder joints, so bad grounds. I fixed all that, and the amp sounded great. I'm sure that off the line, many of them do work. That one did not, but systematically, it was a poor way of approaching it. I've heard anecdotally that they have since changed the way that model is grounded, but I have no direct experience of that. Cherry tones are far from the best Marshall or Marshall style amp that I've heard, but they are better often than many of other Marshalls that made since like 2000. And they may sound better to certain people's ears than the Marshall reissues. Marshall reissues, I think, are overpriced for what they are, but I understand, they have the magic M. Hey, Resno, I saw this question on my phone while we were on the break. That's the kind of question that tells me you need to take your amp to a tech. There can be a multitude of reasons for that. It could be as simple as a bad tube as well. So first thing, pull V3, which is the reverb driver. If the noise goes away, get a different 12AT7 in V3. See if the noise stays away. If you pull V3 and the noise is still there, is it there when the reverb level is at 0? You may have a bad tube in V4, in which case go plug into the reverb channel, pull V1, put it where V4 used to be. You might have just had a bad 12AX7 in V4. If moving those tubes around doesn't do the trick, you need to take your amp to a tech, and I can't prognosticate from here because there could be a lot of things, a lot of different problems with that same general symptom. One of my favorite brown panel Fender amps, I don't know. In theory, like the Concert and the Super and the others with the harmonic tremolo, but that said, I've got a 62 Concert over there, fully restored, waiting to be picked up. And I've had it fully restored for a month or two, and I have not plugged it in since saying, yes, that works, that sounds great. I just don't miss that much. At one point, I had a Sir Ombre here at the same time. I had a 61 or 62 6GA or whatever it is, Deluxe, the actual 62 Deluxe, and the very nice tribute to it that Sir does called the Ombre. And I made sure they both worked, and they both sounded really good. I was never inclined to plug into them. Neither really speaks to me. Now, I think he's here. I don't know if he wants me to call him out, but I will, because I'm stubborn. Brett Mativier, who's here on the stream today, he's had me do quite a bit of work for him, and he was here picking up some amps that I'd done some work on, and I plugged him into that 62 Concert, and he heard that harmonic trem. He's like, I want that. I want to buy one of those. I'm like, well, before you do that, it's a really cool trick, but it's a one-trick pony. I had a Strymon Flint that I wasn't using. I said, take this home with you and plug this into your Route 66s and the other non-tremolo amps you have. Here's a harmonic tremolo setting. And if you like it, you tell me what you think it's worth. And if you don't like it, when you come back to get the other amps, bring it back, and then you can go buy the Concert. He just bought the old Flint because it did the same thing with all his amps as opposed to buying one amp that just does that one thing. So I really love the 58 Bassman. I really love the 57 5v3 Deluxe. But then I really love the AB763. I think Fender, for what Fender was going for the entire time, the Deluxe reverb, the Super reverb, the Twin, they nailed it. That's the point. All the Brown amps were still evolving towards that. It doesn't mean they're not cool. And if they're your favorites, you're right, because it's just purely subjective, and they're very good amps. but I don't have a favorite Brown period amp. I just find them interesting to work on because I can always trace evolution. I've had so many concerts and supers and other models of that time where, hey, that tone stack's not on any schematic. That was something we were just trying that week. It's like I've had back Sandals come into the shop. Oh, Diego, you know I will. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to meet almost every one of you, but not you. You know who I'm talking about, not you. But the rest of you, yeah, absolutely. But especially if it's in Berlin or some other exotic to me locale around the globe. I'm sure you're tired of. Everyone thinks where they live is boring. Isn't that interesting? People save up for years to come here to Memphis because Elvis ain't here anymore. It's been a hot minute, man. Yeah. When we were in London, because we were in Soho, we walked over by the old Apple offices because I was on the way to show Nikki where the cover of Ziggy Stardust was shot, and we went into Fortnum and Mason and got the makings for a picnic, which we then had over in the Inner Temple. Anyway, I digress. But Nikki said, "Hey, that's where the Beatles did. Did you want to go over to Abbey Road and do all of that stuff?" Or I'm like, no, they've not been here since before I was born, and crossing that street won't make me write a song like that. I don't need to be waiting in line to cross the street with other tourists. Maybe living in Memphis, growing up in Memphis, has inoculated me against that. The only thing special about the Beatles London was when the Beatles were there. The rest, I love London, but not for that reason. Sorry, I'm going off on tangents. Alice guitar, am I crazy or do some guitars sound better when played in certain keys? When I'm playing the key of B, my Les Paul really sings. Any idea why that might be the case? A couple of things. Every chord has a different tension or quality to it. And I'm not just talking diatonically. To me, F sharp minor feels different than G minor. Not to everyone. Some people, they're just, oh, that's minor. But other people hear what I'm talking about. And every guitar has certain resonances. So if you have a guitar that really resonates, say, when Bs or F sharps are played, and you really like the emotional quality of a B chord versus a C chord or a B flat chord, then you have a magic combination of a guitar that's really good at resonating at the frequencies that you really relate to. You may find your B flat fine and your C fine, but something about that B is just there. The other thing it can be is Les Pauls in particular, but Gibsons in general, their G strings are prone to playing sharp on the first couple of frets. So you play a B chord, where you're playing the G string at the 4th fret, it's going to be much more in tune than if you play an E major chord, and that G string's going to, especially since it's the 3rd of the chord, not the octave of the chord, it's going to be a sharp 3rd on a major E. It's going to be pretty much a perfect octave on a B. Both because of the way the tempered scale works and because of the closer you get to the nut, the sharper that G string tends to be on a Gibson. Even a well-cut nut where everything's done right, it's just a thing. It's that way on all guitars to some extent, but it's really critical on the Gibson G strings. But and there's also the fact that we love to ascribe imaginary things to music. And maybe that's all I've been doing all this time. But I think there's something to that. My EJ Strat sounds better tuned to E flat than it does if I tune it to E. The entire neck resonates differently, is because it's a different string tension, and I can go from 10s to 9s. Doesn't sound the same. That guitar with 10s and E flat sounds better than that guitar with 9s in E, and it sounds better than that guitar with 11s in E flat. Other Strats sound better to me in standard tuning. And I think that ties in with what you're talking about. Hey, Pepe Le Pew. Come with me to the Casbah. Binding to build a Marshall 87 Mark II leads, 50 watt clone with 6550 tubes. Voltage chart I have is for the 100 watt, where the voltages be the same. Now the voltages will be different. There are so many variations, but here's the thing. The 1987 has always been 100 watt, I'm sorry, 50 watt amp. The 1959 is the 100 watt version. Let me find a reference for you just real quick. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Almost there. Just a second. I know this is the exciting part. All right. Mark II Unicord 1970. All right, I'm not seeing voltages on those. Huh. I'm not searching for voltage chart. There's probably a voltage chart out there. For the voltage chart for any of the 1987s will be mostly much the same overall, though there was a variation in the output. You know, it could be anywhere from 360 volts to 480 volts on the B+. That's the trick. Maybe that's why the voltage charts aren't that useful. I never look at voltage charts when I'm working on a Marshall like that. I just know roughly what the PI is going to be in relation to the screen, etc. And so whatever the B+ is, everything else follows in its scale. And if I want to decrease the preamp, I'll do the two 10Ks in series. If I want to have higher preamp voltages, I'll just have the one 10K. At one part of the board where they have the two 10Ks. Some amps just have a 20K. The voltages are not going to be the same as the 100 watt, but you should be able to find a 50 watt Marshall voltage chart if you need it, but I don't have one in my head because I almost never consult voltage charts. Once I know what the B+ is, then I know that, okay, the B+ should be here, the screen should be a little bit less than that, just a little bit. And then a pretty good drop to the phase inverter node, and then another drop to each other node. Okay. Hey, Mike M. Producer. It is safe to do what I described in that video, so long as you follow what I do in that video and then verify with a meter before you put your hands in and touch anything. Now, if you're just pulling the amp out to get a photo of the guts, do what I showed in that video, exactly as I showed in the video, and then with the amp unplugged from the wall, you can remove it. Don't stick your fingers in. You know, you don't need to pull an amp out of the chassis out of the cab, and then take a picture. And what you're looking for, the bad batch of caps had rubber seals at both ends. The good caps have rubber at the positive end and solid metal disc at the negative end of each cap, and Dave will take care of you. So yeah, discharging the way I showed in that video is safe. If you're going to actually work on the amp after that, then you verify that it was fully discharged with a meter. You don't just trust what some guy on the internet says about how to make it safe. That brings it down to usually below 12 to 10 volts. But if you're just opening it up to take a picture of the inside and you're worried about zapping yourself, my method is perfect for that, because you don't need to. There are those who'd say, no, you need a 20 watt resistor and you connect it here for 3 seconds, whatever. Most people don't need to be dealing with that. They're going to connect to the wrong thing or touch it by accident. They're going to arc weld their hand, you know, or whatever. My method is actually safer than what some techs actually do, but a lot of techs do what I show in that video. Do I think Seritone is better quality than the modern reissue Marshalls? I answered that kind of before earlier. It's better in some ways, worse in others. Certainly, usually a better price perspective if they don't need a bunch of work, but you never quite know. Do I think a Delta Blues 410 is worth fixing? I don't know that I've ever seen a Delta Blues 410. I've only seen I thought the PV Delta Blues was only in the 15. Maybe I'm misremembering. But yeah, I think the PV Delta Blues is the same as the PV Classic 30. It's worth fixing, but it can be a little bit of a money pit because of the nature of the way the board is built. It can need a lot of service to be brought back. Has some heat issues. It's a very fragile thing. Long term, not a great choice. And the main issue I have with the Delta Blues and the whatever you call the other one, the Classic 30, is the chassis is not really supported well in the cabinet. It's just kind of hanging, and the tubes don't have a lot of support, and those tube retainers are almost more problem than they're worth. That said, they can sound wonderful, and they used to be really cheap, and that combination of things was great. But I don't know, keeping it going can be a problem. Hey, Mach J. A GC34, your amp's going to be the same, except your B plus will go up by 30 volts. If you put in the GC34, your B plus will raise about 30 volts. You'll have to rebias everything. Depending on what your wall voltage is, you may not want that because your screen voltage can exceed the rating even for 6L6s. I'm pretty convinced that's why Fender went from the GC34/5AR4 to the 5U4 GB in about 1969. I think they were just looking at, hey, we've got all these amps in production, and we've already spec'd out all these power transformers, and the wall voltage has gone up so much in the last 5 years. Do we change all the power transformers in all our amps? No. We'll just go to the 5U4 and drop 30 volts and be back where we were designing for in 63. So you can try the GC34. Just beware, you probably ought to rebias after you do that. I don't know if you're going to hear much of a difference. 30 volts isn't anything when it comes really to the playing feel or the overall sound. 30 volts is a lot when it comes to screen health on the screen grids, the tube health on the screen grids. Hey, Scott, if you're playing with the EQ on a Super Reverb, should you start with all the tone knobs on 10 because it's all reductive, or all at noon? I mean, which color is the tone less on a reductive EQ? Well, here's the thing. And I see people say this all the time, that you should always keep it on 10 because you're losing so much tone if you turn it down. Fender designed it to sound its best at or around noon on all the knobs, which meant that they designed that to be at noon is the flat sound. You turn it all the way up, you're going to get weird peaks and valleys. You turn it all the way down, you're going to get either nothing or all mids, depending on the amp. If it's got a mid spot, you'll get absolutely no signal at all if it's healthy and all the knobs turn down. I don't have time right now to call up the tone stack generator and show you the graphs. But the amp was designed to sound flat at noon, and the amp was designed with what's called makeup gain, knowing that you would lose X number of dB by using the tone stack as designed. They then add that back afterwards, and that's part of the sound of the classic Fender, is that you have that additional gain stage, which adds back the gain that or some of the gain that you lose from the plate-driven tone stack. So when I see people say that you should keep everything on 10, the famous story among techs, at least, and I have no reason to believe it's not true, is that Stevie Ray always wanted his amp volumes to be on 10. And his amp tech thought his amp sounded like garbage when his amp knobs were all on 10. So he took all Stevie Ray's amps and changed out the pots so that when they were all on, and put in some resistors, so that when all the knobs were on 10, they were the same as a knob set the way the amp tech liked them. So 4.5 on bass, 5 on mid, and 6 on treble. So Stevie Ray put them all on 10 to get back to where the amp would have been if you'd set his knobs more normally. It's easier to change the amp than to change the player's mind sometimes, I guess. I don't know if that's entirely an accurate story. I've not heard it from anyone like Caesar or Renee, but it would not surprise me because players' approach to things are never quite, how things actually work are never usually quite what players expect for them to work. I never do that on anyone's Fender unless I'm making sure that there's no oscillation. I'll gain, Marshall, and I'll do the whole Van Halen, max everything out. Just make sure an amp's healthy enough to stand up to it and it doesn't reveal a problem. But I don't think it would sound, it never sounds very good, including the famous Marshall Tone Stack suite. Hey, Keith. Considering the Gibson were such a big company, why are their amps not as popular as Fender? Well, Martin, it comes down to one thing mainly. In my opinion, I know, I'm sure there might have been some stuff behind the scenes where they just didn't push, this department didn't push well enough, or they didn't agree with the marketing, or didn't have a good enough campaign strategy. But it comes down to me to the T filter. Gibson, starting about 63, invested heavily in the T filter, which does all these notches, which really neuters the gain out of any of their amps and really makes things kind of sound thin and a bit scooped. Late 60s Fender amps suck in comparison to it's like a 61, 60. And I think it is simply this. If you play Gibson and in the 60s, odds are you wanted to sound like Wes Montgomery. So you got yourself an ES-175 because you couldn't afford an L5. Then you got a twin reverb or deluxe reverb because that's the sound, man. That's the sound. And then everybody's gone surfing. Well, you need that Fender thing. Gibson wasn't chasing Jimmy Page. Gibson wasn't chasing Jeff Beck. Gibson wasn't chasing the Beatles. Gibson was not chasing anything happening in current music. Gibson was laying it all on the line for Trini Lopez. Very adult contemporary acts, Vegas nightclub acts, the Copacabana. That's what they were chasing for some reason. So you had these very polite amps, kind of loungy, not very interesting. It's weird. They lost the plot. You take one of those 66 Gibsons and you yank all the T circuits out and give the thing some balls again. You got a cool amp. But man, they just did everything possible to make their amps sound boring, and they were. But the earlier ones are great. You get a 58 through 60 G18T or something, fantastic amp. Hey, you said that in one of my chat videos, said the preamp output cathode bypass should not be 2 microfarad. I swapped it for 25, but it looks like the schematic does say 2 microfarad. I don't remember the video you're referring to, and I know that in some of the champs and barber champs, they do have a cap which is like a 2 microfarad. They have another one that's like a 4. But I don't know what I said in that video or what the context was or what the client was going for at that time. So I'm not going to argue with myself without remembering what I was saying. But I do like dehandicapping the champs and Princetons. And that's one of the ways that they were making sure the champ would not compete with a Princeton or a deluxe reverb by giving it less low end. But it also depends on the speaker you're using. So I would have to rewatch that video to re-answer that question, which I cannot do that now. Is it worth the extra $400 to $600, hey William Catalano, to buy the hand-wired used white Fawn Tolex Vox AC15 with a blue over a regular AC15 with a blue? I wouldn't pay $400 to $600 for white Fawn. First of all, the Fawn Tolex tears if you look at it. I like the basket weave much better. So if you're talking about 2 hand-wired AC15s with blues, save $400 and buy the regular reissue, hand-wired, whatever, in black. If you're going between a $600 between a hand-wired white Fawn AC15 with a blue over a regular, by which you mean the custom series, not the hand-wired series, 15 with the blue, again, I would save even more money and buy a used AC15C1 with a blue or with a green back, and change out your speaker choice down the road, and use the extra money to buy a guitar or a second amp or some really cool pedals, or I don't know, some really nice steaks. The hand-wired's not any better than the custom series. It's just a lot more expensive. In some ways, the custom's better. In some ways, the hand-wired's got a few advantages. But aside from, they're almost interchangeable as far as quality, or neither one are a faithful reproduction of what they did in the 60s. So, hey, Jules Eppa, I've never worked on a JSX. That's a Satriani. I imagine it's built similarly to the 5150, but I've never worked on that model. Sorry. If Dave's still here or Brad's still here, they might have some experience with it. I'm sure that they do. I've never worked on this Joe Satriani. Sorry, Jules. Oh man, the thing to look out for with converted Filma sounds is the converted Filma sounds. Avoid Danger of Will Robinson. They're junk. They're always junk. The chassis was never designed to be a guitar amp. The transformer was never meant for that. People do all kinds of awful things to cram them to make them work. If you want a 5E3 Deluxe, buy a 5E3 Deluxe chassis and kit and all that fun stuff. Get a chassis designed for the circuit where everything lays out well. Layout matters. Just because the components are the same and the circuit's the same, if you have a rat's nest in this area because you're trying to make things fit, the noise level goes up, the serviceability goes down, the heat builds up. The Filma sound is junk. Don't waste your money on it. Go buy a 5E3 Tweed or Deluxe or a kit build version of it. Even a not fantastic kit build has the potential to be made into a really good amp. The Filmo sound stuff, I turn those away all the time. They're just so bad. It's a bad idea. People like kitsch. It's just pure kitsch. Are there any good auto bias schemes? No. It's not necessary. Unless you consider cathode bias, which is also known as self-bias, to be a auto bias. All right. The copper wire debate. Man, if there's all that much to that kind of debate, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. Think of how many infinite miles of copper, what I just said to you, travels between this diaphragm and whatever speaker you're using, including all the stuff in the satellites. You know, if copper was really that finicky about passing electrons, right? It's not, especially when talking about moving audio a few feet or a few inches in a guitar. Just people love to argue about stuff. Speaking of arguing about stuff, we need to wrap this up. I'm sorry I'm not going to get to all the questions this time. Because I got to go pick up my wife and daughter downtown. I'm going to make sure that I've not missed any super chats. I have not. I've not ever spoken or corresponded with Merlin, but I know he's a real person. And he's a really smart old person. Not let me say old person, real person. He may be an old person, maybe very young and prodigious. He may be just extremely much a prodigy, but I think he's probably got a few years on me at least. Mentally, he's probably got centuries on me. I mean that as a compliment. I realize that could go either way. Oh, let me stretch a little bit. Been trying the different flavors of Friedman 20-watt amps. I've discovered the little sister scratches my sound itch. Glorious tones. That's the cool thing about Dave. If you don't like his amp, try one of the other 17 he's got. He's got all those flavors too. Odds are you'll find something you like. Hey, Rob French, I appreciate you, man. That's very nice. That's very nice of you. Hey, Victor, are you just getting here? Well, that's why it's felt off for the last 2 hours. We got started 2 hours too soon. And now I've got to say aloha in the other sense to you, Victor. But mahalo. I'll see you guys. That's from last week when I had the. I gotta go back to the intermission real quick. All right, I have a thing where I just push the button, go to the next scene, the next scene, the next scene. So I thought I was ending the stream, but instead I just went to the intermission that would normally be at the end of at this time. And because last week I had the photo display happening during intermission, that screen tried to come up and it was weird. And then I couldn't explain myself because it also mutes the mic when I do that. So let me do this way. And now it's going to work. All right. Thanks, guys. Sorry. Technical issues.